The poem A Legend of the Northland is penned by Phoebe Carey. This poem is a ballad. This poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. Legend here means old traditional story. Saint Peter in the poem is an apostle of Christ. In stanza 1 we read, Away, away in the Northland, away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. The poet here presents the Northland, where the winter season makes the people feel extremely cold. The people cannot rest for a while as the night seems to be long and the day seems to be short. We can conclude that the poet is talking about the southernmost area of the earth. Most probably, we can assume that the poet might have thought about North Pole, where the days are short because the sun rays reach for very short while. Here, during the winter, the duration of the night is longer, and so the people who live in Northland feel extremely cold. As the nights are long, the people cannot sleep for that long. The poet here wants to emphasize the fact that nights are very long, and this is why it has been stated that people can't sleep them through. This region experiences a severe cold, and due to this weather condition, the people living in Northland use reindeers. Reindeers are the animals that they use to drag their sledges. If you read the next stanza, you will learn how the children look. They look pretty when they wear the furry clothes, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. So the children wear warm clothes. They usually wear funny furry clothes, and so they look like bears' cubs. And the reindeers are tied through the harness to drag the sledges. And as they are running swiftly, the children play in the snow. So when it snows, the scene is picturesque because the reindeers are seen to be dragging the sledges and the children who look like bear cubs are playing in the snow. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe that is true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. So, if the tale of Northland is narrated by the poet, the readers would definitely believe. Now, the poet is not very much sure whether the story is real or not, but it is a curious story. That's what the poet feels. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching just as he did. So the story begins like this. Once upon a time, there lived a saint somewhere in the nook and corner of the world. that he resided. He thought to preach people, and this is how he started walking. He walked and visited many places far and wide, and he reaches the Northland one fine day. And as he reaches the Northland one fine day, he happens to come near the cottage. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. So the poet is describing the scene where Saint Peter is about to knock the door of the cottage because he could see that the little woman living in the cottage was baking the cakes. Saint Peter had been preaching people since long now, and he was traveling since long. So he was feeling tired, and he thought that he would faint as he was starving. He was thinking to himself if he could get something to eat, and this is why he thought to ask for cake. He had a word with the little woman and asked for a cake. And being faint with fasting for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. He was asking for just one cake. Okay, but ultimately, he realized that the lady who was baking the cakes was really not very much willing to part with her cakes. She had lot many cakes in her store in the kitchen, but she seemed to be greedy. As we read further, we learn what did she do. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. So she thought to herself that it was too big to be given away. So she was hesitant. She did not want to share any piece of cake with the priest. And the priest, who was waiting there for long, was feeling annoyed. He was irritated and angry. Therefore, she needed another, and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. So every time she is preparing the cake, she feels that it is larger than the one that she had already prepared. So like this, she kept on kneading the dough, and every time she baked the cake, she thought it was bigger than the one that she had already prepared. And this is how she did not share anything with Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that. Rolled and rolled. She kept on rolling. She kneaded the dough every time, and this time it was a scrap, very tiny piece of dough to roll the flat wafer kind of cake. Okay, so she is preparing the smallest one ever. She thought that this time it would be too very small to be given away. But then again, when she baked the cake, she thought that it could not be parted with. Why? Because it seemed to be bigger than the one she had already prepared. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. So every time she prepared the cake, all the cakes were kept in the kitchen somewhere on the shelf. And she thought that whenever I eat the cake, I would relish it because they are too large to be given away. She preferred to eat them all rather than giving it away to the saint. So here, when you read the stanza, you come across alliteration and repetition. Here, the sound of letter S has been repeated. If you read the word seam in small, in the previous stanza we read rolled and rolled. In the second line of the ninth stanza, we can mark the poetic device that is repetition. Let us read further. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint, provoke to make someone feel annoyed or angry. Okay, so here the woman made the saint go angry. So he was so very angry that he thought that he should curse the woman. He was hungry and he was about to faint. So the thing seemed to be quite unbearable for the saint. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm." So he said that you should not be in the form of a human being. You should not be gifted with so many things that you possess right now. You don't deserve them all. Why? Because you are very selfish. So it would be good if you turn into something else and you find difficult for yourself to arrange for food and shelter and keep yourself warm. This is what the priest thought, that the lady was really gifted with so many good things in life, that she had taken the things for granted and she had become extremely mean and selfish. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard dry wood. Okay, so here the poet is stating that the lady, the woman, should turn into a bird. He cursed her to be a bird, and she was supposed to build a nest somewhere on the top of the tree, look for the food that would be scanty in the winter season, and she was expected to bore and bore and bore as long as it was possible for the bird to do, and then live somewhere in the dry wood. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So the bird did fly off through the chimney, high up in the sky. It was unable to share or express anything, and the lady, even the woman, was unable to speak a word because she was cursed, and immediately she turned into a bird, and there was no way out that she could chant anything or share anything to the priest. And as she flew, the people could see that there was a woodpecker high up on the top of the tree, boring. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. She might have been wearing the cap, or it is a woodpecker that carries a feather, a kind of a cap on the head. That is what we as readers can assume. And that was left as it is on her head. And as she was a bird now, rest of her clothes seemed to be have been burned, and they had been black as coal in the flame. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. So we end the poetry and we learn that the school children, those who have been passing by the wood, they still see the bird boring for food in the winter season in the Northland where there is scanty food. So the legend seems to be true and interesting.